Hi everyone, welcome to my parent tutorial on partial division. My name is Elena Gillum. If you are a parent that's not in my class and you're looking for something to help you, I'm hoping this parent tutorial will help you be able to help your child. Just a quick background about myself. I have taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math for 7.5 years. And then in January, I moved back to Arkansas and am now teaching 4th grade math and science. So I'm learning a lot from my 4th graders about different ways that they start off learning. And so the reason I started to make these tutorials is because I know there are a lot of parents that only know the traditional way to multiply or the traditional way to divide and are teaching their children the traditional way, which they're not ready for, and there's a reason they're not ready for it yet. So I made this video to show you a quick way of understanding partial division. So let's get started. So to give you a little background on where they start with division and how we build up to going into the traditional, as you know, they understand the multiplication is, for example, 3 times 2 is 6. And then we also work at 3 times 20, okay, that's 60. And so we're building up that number sense of understanding place value. 3 times 200, well, that makes 600, that there's a relationship between the 3 and 2, and that the 0 tells you what place value it is. So that's normally where we start to transition to division. So same thing works the opposite way. If they're doing 6 divided by 3, they know that's 2. Well, now if they're thinking, well, 60 divided by 3, oh, that's going to be 20 because 6 and 3 is 20. And same thing for 600 divided by 3. That is 200. And this is where we start, for them to start realizing these patterns before they actually start doing some partial division that leads to the traditional method. So let's look at what a partial division problem will look like. Okay, let's take a look at 336 divided by 3. So at this point, you will see them making, it looks like the number 7, and it looks just like what we normally do for long division. What I tell my students is that on this side is where we do our brainstorming of how many groups can we make of this number. And then what looks like traditional division is going to be on this side. So the first thing I ask my students, and I have them think about this, is think about if you blocked this off, and they usually use their hands. And I say 3 times what gives you that 3? And they'll tell you, oh, well, 3 times 1. But then I'm like, but you have to remember, now remove it. Is that actually a 3? What is the place value it's in? Oh, this 3 right here is actually 300, not just a 3. So it can't be 3 times 1, it has to be 3 times 100. So we're really trying to focus on place value. And some of them will write this, 3 times 100 is 300. And then they'll come over here and they'll subtract. So what we're teaching them is that they can make 100 groups. That's the biggest number that they could think of. I mean, some of them could have thought of a bigger number, but most of them will pick the 100. And how many people are you grouping if you group it, make 100 groups of 3? Well, you have 300. Well, then we're like, okay, but there's still, groups that you need to make. You have 36 that still need to go in a group. Some students will see the 3 times 12 and be like, oh, it's 3 times 12. You may also have some that say, okay, no, 3 times 10, because I know that's 30. And they'll subtract 30. And then they'll have 6 left. And then they'll be like, oh, that's 3 times 2. And then they'll subtract 6, and they'll have the remainder. And then they'll go, okay, how many groups did I make? Well, those are all of my groups. So that would be 112. And if they write it correctly on the top, you can see the traditional division that you would normally see, because we would say, okay, 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 goes into 6 2 times. But we are focusing on place value when we are doing the partial division, which is how they are interpreting this. And that's why when you teach them the traditional, they're very confused because you're ignoring the place value. Let's go ahead and try another problem. Now let's do 4,562 divided by 4. My fourth graders are well aware of remainders, and they will be completely fine if there is a remainder. So if this does, I just picked a random number so it could have a remainder. So if it was one of my students working this problem, once again, they're going to cover part of it with their hand, and they're going to think about 4 goes into 4 how many times. And the reason I'm helping them with that is so when they do get to that traditional division, they kind of already been doing it. And they'll be like, oh, it's actually, so 4 goes into 4 times 1. But this isn't just a 4, this is 4,000. So then they'll think, oh, I need to do 4 times 1,000. And then they'll come and they'll subtract it. Okay, so I already grouped 4,000 people. I made 1,000 groups of 4, which is 4,000. And they'll subtract and say, okay, that's 562. And then you might have they'll be like, oh, well, I know that 4 times 100 is 400. And they'll subtract 400 from there. And some of them will pick random numbers sometimes. And we will just go with it. So, and then this next one, they'll probably think about covering it up once again. And they'll be like, okay, well, 4 can't go into 1 equal, like with a whole number. And then, but they were like, oh, it will go into 16. And so they'll think, okay, 4 times 4 is 16, but this is 162, so it has to be 4 times 40. And so then you have 160, and then they'll have the remainder too. And they'll think about, okay, what did I group it? I grouped 1,000, 100, and 40. So they will come up here and write 1,000, 100, and 40. And they'll write remainder 2. A few of my students have already started to use decimals, majority or not, but if your child is doing that, that's great. Or I have a few that are actually writing fractions as well. They'll say 2/4 instead of remainder 2, but we're focusing on remainder 2. Okay, I'm going to do one more short example just to solidify, and hopefully this will help you. One thing I do know is 7s are a struggle for some students. So let's say we had 5,789 divided by 7. And once again, I have no clue if this is going to have a remainder because I'm just coming up with numbers. So they're going to set this up similar, just like they would for long division. And then majority of my students are going to look and say, well, 7 doesn't go into 5, but can 7 go into 57? And what could be the closest? And they'll be like, oh, well, 7 times 8 is 56. But they have to think this is 5,700. So this needs to be 800. And we talk about the way you say it helps you know exactly what to place down. So that would be 5,600. And this is why the multiplication is so important, that they understand that 7 times 8 is 56. 7 times 80 is 560. 7 times 800 is 5,600. It's because it all leads up. So if your student is struggling with division, they may actually be struggling with the multiplication as well. So, and then we have 7 to, how many times will 7 go into 180? Well, once again, they're going to look at that 18. And they're going to say, well, 7 times 2 will give me 14, which is close to 18, but this is 180, so it'd be 7 times 20. And then they'll subtract 140. And then they'll have 49 left. And then they'll be, oh, that's easy. You'll have 7 times 7, which is 49 with no remainder. Got lucky. Okay, and then they're going to talk about how many groups did you make? They made one group, a group of 800, group of 20, and a group of 7. So they have a total of 827 groups. And I always talk with my students about checking their answers by multiplying, going back and actually multiplying the 827 times 7 and seeing if they get the same answer. Well, if you took the time to watch the video, I hope it helped. If there's any other topics that you would like me to kind of break down for parents to help you help your child and understand what they're doing in class, feel free to write me in the comments and I'll be more than happy to really quick create a video. Have a great day, and if you are one of my parents, please let me know if this video helped. I would love to get any feedback.